Hello, AP Euro. This is an overview of the Industrial Revolution. And whenever I'm thinking about these different eras, I think of the cause, the course, and the consequences. So how did it start? Then what are facts and events and people that define it? And then finally, what are effects of it or consequences of it? And with the Industrial Revolution, this is one of the more important chapters in our study because it's a massive revolution economically that has effects, enormous effects that are political and social and cultural, and so it's an important one to really know well. Okay, so I'll do it this way. So Industrial Revolution. Think about what the definition of it is. Oops, this pen. Industrial Revolution. Think of what change is being made. Industrial Revolution. Think about it goes from nature and skilled labor. This is how things change from nature, and seasons is the way that people decide what work to do, and skilled labor and muscle, either animal or man. And the change that happens in the Industrial Revolution is instead of what we do is being defined by nature and seasons, it's now done by the clock. And instead of skilled labor, it's unskilled labor that's necessary, basically tending to machines. It's like Terminator, Rise of the Machines. Unskilled, okay. Muscle to machine. Okay. And industrialization doesn't happen overnight. It happens over the course of a long period of time. Remember that it starts in Great Britain and it eventually spreads. But in Britain, why does it start there? Well, one, this is when we think of the causes, okay? So what are the causes of the Industrial Revolution? There are a couple of long-term causes that happen in Great Britain. One is an agricultural revolution. And that occurs in the 1700s. And this is a change. Remember, all these is about change. Change is a triangle, the delta sign. And really that's what this whole unit's about, the change. Agricultural revolution, and also the other change that happens are advances in the textile industry. Advances in textiles or cloth making. And again, what is the change that happens there? Where you have machine replacing muscle, unskilled labor replacing skilled labor. And we think about the consequences of that. And so first we looked at the agricultural revolution and what came before it. Well, it went from subsistence farming and a rural society. And you had, remember, complementary men and women doing complementary work, and children. So children are not going to schools during this time. The whole family is working to survive. And so think back to the farming. It's the 3-field system, complementary roles or gender roles. So we're looking at the before so that we appreciate the after. 3-field farming, and you can think back to the farms of oats and beans and barley, and you had a fallow field, right? Go back over those notes. And the change that happens is there are different advances. One of the advances are in machinery, and so things like Jethro Tull's seed drill. You also have, think about controlled breeding, where you get larger sheep. That was Robert Bakewell. You had Lord Turnip Townsend, turnips, and 4-field crop rotation. All right, what does all this do? It ends up changing it ends up increasing. And this is the same with the textiles, both advances in textiles. I'll just make an arrow here. More efficient, process, which means you need less people to produce it. And there's more output. And whether it's the new type of fields farming that is being done, or it's the way that textiles change, what we'll look at now. The other thing, this is not necessarily good for peasants, right? Remember, there's a series of enclosure acts, the enclosure movement, where basically the wealthy farmers, the gentry or the bourgeois, they're able to take over the farms, and it causes what are the effects of this? So effects of the agricultural revolution is you have a lot of people moving to cities, urbanization. You have more food. You have people who are now working for wages instead of working to grow their own food. And you develop a working class of people. And because there's more food, you also have population growth. All right. And so this is happening in Britain. There's this agricultural revolution leading to these effects. Remember, we were looking at economic and social effects of these. And then with the textile industry, again, this is how clothes are made. Before, people used to make their own cloth at home. And we're talking about Britain right now, and in most of Europe, they can't grow cotton there. Before their plantations in cotton, they could only use wool for sheep. And there's the cottage industry. Remember, and it's mostly done by women during the winter months. And think of, they've got a spinning wheel and a loom, and it was long work to make, and they're working from home. But then you have this advances in textiles, and some of those advances include different machines. Like there's an evolution of the machines that are made, whether it was the flying shuttle or whether it was the water frame or the spinning jenny. These are all just advances. And instead of being done at home, these were done in mills. And eventually you get machines that are so big, they have to be put in large buildings that are called factories. And the rise of factories is in the late 1700s, early 1800s in Britain. And that one machine that we saw, the spinning mule, could make, so production more efficient, it's more efficient, less people to produce, and there's more output. And this same thing works for for farming as it does for textiles and clothes. And so there's greater production of clothes. You also have wealth. The bourgeois or factory owners are going to, just like factory owners and farmers, they're going to become incredibly wealthy. But you also have these effects of people losing their jobs to the machines. And so right here, these people who used to work from home can no longer make money selling clothes because the price of clothes goes down. Price of clothes goes down. And the machines are taking people's jobs. So there's anger at machines, and you have people who break the machines. Remember the Luddites or Captain Swing? This is one way in which people are arguing for more workers' rights because of the change in textiles. There's also, it's not just wool, you also have, because of British colonies that are established in the plantation system, British colonies, especially in the Americas. But then after the Revolution and the Civil War, also they get colonies in India by the mid 1700s. They defeat France and India, and they take India, the colonies there, and they use that to grow cotton and cash crops, as well as other crops that we've seen later during imperialism, like indigo and also opium. And so they're also using cotton in these factories with the spinning mule. What are some of the effects of this? They're using slavery. They're also, in the beginning, the first wave of factory labor was children, were orphans, working in miserable conditions. And let's see. And so this is what the Industrial Revolution, you can see but the first phase of this Industrial Revolution is a change in agriculture, which has massive effects of urbanization. People move to the cities. There's more food. There are more wage workers now. There's a class of people who are looking for work, who are unskilled now, and there's population growth. Similarly, because of advances in the textile industry, which again, just like agriculture, are making more efficient process to create more products. There's more output and less people to produce it because of these machines. It's changed an entire way of life where you don't have families living in the countryside and using subsistence living. And so over here, I'm just going to write subsistence. That means you make just enough in order to survive. And you can survive barely if the whole family works together to make food, and the community works together to make food and to make clothes. And so subsistence agriculture up here, and subsistence for your clothes. Later, though, it all changes, where instead of working and getting things that you make and working on the seasons, you're working for wages, you're working for pay. And a lot of people during this time also are not working for anything. You have a massive amount of slaves. You also have people working for such little wages that they're being forcibly put into these factories. And this is by the early 1800s. So this is the first wave of the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to say by 1830, okay, by this point. You've got factories, you've got cities growing, and what are the effects of this? On the next page, I guess we'll get to this. The effects of this are, you have overcrowded, dirty cities, and so the next part of the overcrowded, dirty cities and disease is spreading. You have very wealthy factory owners. You do have a growing middle class of people, a growing bourgeoisie, but you also have a very even larger class of unskilled working class people. So growth of working class. And again, by this time, the government in Britain is only represented, right? You've got a king and parliament sharing power, and the only people who can vote are wealthy men with property. And while some people are getting fantastically rich, there are also lots of problems going on in England as a result. And so at this point, people you're getting to reactions to the Industrial Revolution. And reactions include different ideologies and different actions by the government. And so, let's see, can I do it on this paper? Yeah, I'll try. Okay. Ideologies. I'm going to start with the capitalists. So you have capitalism, and Adam Smith, who published On the Wealth of Nations in 1776 is when he wrote it. And they argued for laissez-faire, which is no government interference in the economy. And that's pretty much what was going on in this early part of the Industrial Revolution. There are no regulations, right? And other ideas that come out of this time too. If you remember from the Agricultural Revolution that has to do with population growth, is Thomas Malthus. And the Malthusian catastrophe. And this has to do, I'm just going to write pop growth and food, and the catastrophe, meaning a famine that results when you have too many people and not enough food to feed them. And these are ideas that are happening during this time as you have population growth and also increases in the technology of creating food, and they have to keep up with each other. Another one you have that has to do with a rise of working class people, lots of wage workers looking for work, is the Iron Law of Wages of David Ricardo. And so all these wage workers, Iron Law of Wages, and these are all pretty downers. These are ideas that because there's so many unskilled workers, you'll always be able to pay a low wages to them because there'll always be people in search of work. And so they'll earn barely enough just to survive. The Iron Law of Wages. And that guy's name was David Ricardo. And these were the different characters we had during this time too. At the same time, let's go back to why was this happening in Britain? So you do have this agricultural revolution. You also have the growth of the textile industry. But why is it happening here? Well, Britain is lucky, one, because it's an island. So this is like for why Britain. It's an island. And two reasons why this island is important. Water provides transportation. And instead of building up a big army, Britain built up a big navy and merchant fleet and is able to use the water for its advantage. Also, the creation of canals within Britain. Before the railway, there were canals. And so this is in the 1700s, they're building lots of canals. This allows much cheaper transportation over water than over land. The other reason why being on an island is helpful is because you're naturally protected from attack. And so Napoleon, while he takes over much of Europe, he's unable to attack Britain because it's protected, I'm going to say, from invasion, that natural moat that's around an island.